us. And in fact, the Africans who came out from Africa have no evidence of any Neanderthal genes in them. No evidence of admixture. So they're the real pure humans. Homo sapiens. Really, really interesting, and it gives you a lot to think about. Right.
So these giants among men are in the Bible. We've all heard the stories of the Anunnaki. Sometimes they were even considered like black, had African features at times. And they were the kings and queens of Egypt.
Kinky hair and a broad nose and lips. Many of the Cam look very African, actually, like as they're like Negroes, basically. Words like Cambodia, Kampuchea, Cam. The ancient word in Egyptian for Egypt was Kemet. That's what the Egyptians called they didn't call themselves Egyptians, or Egypt. They called it Kemet, Cam. So here's the same word. And in fact, there seems to be a very strong connection between ancient Egypt and these Cam people.
Hey, peace. So this video is mostly based around this book right here. I found this book a couple years ago, and it really speaks to the history that you never ever hear from anything in academia. So I can't read the whole book to you. Obviously, it's 392 pages. So, but the book is free online. You can read it for yourself. You know me, I'm gonna tell you, do it for yourself. But I do want to hit some hot points in here, and then as you've seen, I got some clips I'm gonna share to kind of back up what this book is saying. So you see, the book is called Dead Man's Secrets: 10 to 90 Hits of a Lost Super Race by Jonathan Gray. All right, and it's basically saying how evolution says we evolved to this point that we are now.
And it goes something like this. In the beginning, we were all fish, okay? Swimming around in the water. And then one day, a couple of fish had a retard baby, and the retard baby was different, so it got to live. So retard fish goes on to make more retard babies, and then one day, a retard baby fish crawled out of the ocean with its mutant fish hands, and it had butt sex with a squirrel or something and made this retard frog squirrel. And then that had a retard baby, which was a monkey fish frog. And then this monkey fish frog had butt sex with that monkey, and that monkey had a mutant retard baby that screwed another monkey, and that made you. So there you go. You're the retarded offspring of 5 monkeys having butt sex with a fish squirrel. Congratulations.
But archaeology is showing that we were once at a greater state than we are now. From superior to inferior, wherever we look, regression is evident. If there be any doubt, take these 23 examples, skim through if you wish. There's quite enough to prove it. Digging to the lowest depths, archaeologists repeatedly come upon a city complex architecturally superior to later cities on the same site. Look up the serpent mounds. Once they dug up under, once they start digging up under there, they kept finding things older than the stuff above it. As in, it's been there so long that different civilizations, if you will, have interacted at the same site. That's what this is saying. The medicine of ancient Egypt was, generally speaking, far superior to that practiced in Europe during Middle Ages. Pre-Incan medical surgery was superior to that of Peruvian Inca. The ocean-going vessels employed by ancient explorers were large, strong, and immensely superior to the crafts possessed by medieval Europeans. The earliest ancient maps were drawn with the greatest precision and superior to later navigational charts. The old Mayan, which is Olmec calendar, is superior to our own. It can be demonstrated that many languages have suffered degeneration. Ancient set building stones are much larger and more difficult to transport than those of subsequent cultures. In Dynamic realism, the masterpieces of Cro-Magnon cave artists of Altamira, Spain, and Le Casque, France, was superior to the paintings and sculptures of later civilizations. Roads, Britain's prehistoric Eakland's Way, running 200 miles in places as wide as 4 lanes. The highway is superior to any road constructed by later Romans. Mathematics, where ancient cultures knew about zero, the secret ingredient in advanced mathematics. Frequently, as decadence occurred, they forgot it. The Babylonians, for example, wrote it as a blank space, a practice which eventually disappeared. The same retrograde process occurred in China. And you can see, etc., etc. Egypt declined from technical sophistication to a vague shadow of its former glory. Earliest pyramid construction was superior to later pyramid construction. Succeeding pyramids are clumsy imitations. Even construction methods change, from levitation science to build the Great Pyramid in the 4th dynasty to a balance of levers and pulleys 1,000 years later in the 12th dynasty. The workmanship level of jewelry as well as the architecture was high in earlier periods, everything being more perfectly made and more beautiful. On top of that, later generations suffered a decline in lifestyle. Sumeria, extensive and all-encompassing, was in many respects more advanced than the cultures which followed it, etc., etc.
The world before the flood had greater atmospheric pressure because of the gravitational weight of that firmament pushing in on the atmosphere. The world before the flood was protected from the harmful radiation. And that produced some very wonderful things. Essentially, everything in the fossil record was larger in the past than it is today. The great white shark today gets 36 feet long, but in the fossil record, he is 60 feet long. Something must explain that. In addition to that, this lepidodendron has its counterpart today. The very same form is the Lycopsid club moss. It gets 16 inches tall at best. But in the fossil record, that very same plant is 150 feet tall. We're not evolving. We've lost something in the process, or lost the conditions that would permit the full expression of the life form. Did you get that?
So, as you see, it says lost super race. So in chapter 1, right on this little part right here, I wanted to read it, but it's kind of, I know y'all attention spans and people reading. Plus, I don't want to be reading too much on here because I want to read a lot of this other stuff, the science. But this part right here, he's telling a story. Sorry to be going back and forth like that. He's telling a story about the last day of the world, the last day of Earth, if you will, before the flood, okay, before the deluge. Okay, he's just telling a hypothetical story, you know what I'm saying, how he think it happened based on the writings and the history that is told by the indigenous people all over the world. So he's telling the story, and basically in this story he's saying how they were really advanced, but the average person never thought that the world could end, you know, that a flood could happen, blah, 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 blah. So he says something like this was occurring on the final night of the antediluvian era. If we are to believe later traditions, that is. As for the worldwide greenhouse environment, geology would one day attest to it as well as to its sudden demise. Traditions would later describe survivors of the deluge who were like gods, that is, they were members of a superior civilization which ceased to exist after the Great Flood. Egyptian records would contend that the reign of the gods before the first dynasty was one of superior and miraculous powers.
And when you look at history, usually a civilization starts down here and moves up here and becomes more advanced.
Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now my whole team here, niggas.
In Egypt, it started at the top and then it got devolved in its cultural integrity. Then you throw in the giants, and something's going on here in Egypt. Long, long time ago. So these slides I'm going to show you are many of the kings being portrayed as the giants. And you could say, okay, well, that's grandiose treatment of a king. But you'll also see some giants as workers, that maybe their physical strength and being a lesser caste than the king giants, perhaps. There's not enough room for all of us to be kings. Let's face it, only a few of us can do that. So remember the Nephilim, and we're going to talk a few things about the Bible. The Nephilim were, in Genesis, were the giants among men.
Regarding the tradition that giants occupied Britain before Brutus, that the giants were the builders of the stone circles, the metallics, the giant tombs in Britain, Mauritania, Sardinia, and other places colonized by the Phoenicians. It is significant that Moor, Maru, Morata, Amorite, Syrian, Phoenician, Palestine are called giants by the Hebrews in the Old Testament. They are more also called by the sons of Anak, Skada, yada, 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 giants.
I mean, there's so much documentation that ancient scripts and legends, and we're going to go into some Native American.
This is another Cam statue from Vietnam, which looks very Mayan. In fact, if you take this photo to southern Mexico or Guatemala and show it to somebody, they would probably tell you, oh yeah, that's a Mayan statue. Where is it? Oh, it's in Vietnam. So
Stuff about the giants, it's everywhere. This is what's so mind-blowing about this. It is everywhere. It's just hidden in plain sight. So these giants among men are in the Bible. We've all heard the stories of the Anunnaki. Sometimes they were even considered like black, had African features at times. And they were the kings and queens of Egypt. And of course, they were huge.
After the deluge, the Papal Fool, the sacred book of the Quanishi Indians of Guatemala, will record the first race of men before the flood possessed all knowledge. They studied the four quarters of heaven and the round surface of the earth. Understood in this light, even Greek mythology begins to make some sense. We see it as a recollection by a degenerate race of vast, mighty, and high civilized empire, which in a remote past covered the world. Pause for reflection. Can we possibly imagine that all of the peoples of all continents independently invented such a story? Did they all speak of an original golden age by chance without any foundation? Does that make any sense that all of these indigenous cultures, Egypt, Asia, and in America, all had a story of an ancient golden age? Did they all make it up out of there? Okay. Indeed, I am tempted to ask, if man evolved from beast, then why is it that there exists a long tradition of a golden age instead of that of a savage past? Will anyone explain this?
Most recently, a team of scientists from the University of Texas conducted 38,000 scans of Lucy's bones. After researching the different breaks and fractures, they concluded that she died while falling over 40 feet out of a tree while she was awake, even trying to break her fall. Lucy, a little 3.5-foot, 55-pound ape that supposedly walked on 2 feet like a human, died by falling 40 feet out of a tree.
The Africans who came out from Africa have no evidence of any Neanderthal genes in them.
Made of hundreds of bone fragments glued together to make 47 parts, even accidentally including a vertebrae from a different species, do we really know what she was? Her skull, inner ears, locking wrist, curved fingers, and short legs reveal that she was definitely an ape. But that's not what evolutionists want you to think. Shown with human expressions, eye whites, which no apes have, and walking upright, they want you to think she was on her way to becoming human. They want you to believe that there are hundreds of Lucy's kind buried in the earth, as in this video where Johansson explains there are 400 Australopithecine specimens and marches an army of hundreds of complete skeletons across the screen. But what he doesn't say is that he's talking about 400 bone specimens, not individuals, and 35% of these specimens are just teeth, and fewer than a dozen are skulls, all of which have been pieced together using numerous broken pieces. Here is a picture showing the majority of this entire collection, sitting on top of a single table. If human evolution really happened over millions of years, wouldn't we expect to find more? With over 7 billion humans alive today, shouldn't the ground be filled with transitions of apes still evolving into humans? Even Darwin realized that this was a problem by stating, "As by my theory, innumerable transitional forms must have existed. Why do we not find them embedded in countless numbers in the crust of the earth?" So, just what was Lucy? The answer is straightforward. Lucy and other Australopithecines are extinct apes, just like many other ape species that have gone extinct. She walked on all fours, ate the foods that apes eat, and lived among other animals that are similar to those that live around apes today. So, why do some evolutionists fight so hard to keep Lucy and other icons as supposed proof for evolution? Let's see what Donald Johanson, Lucy's discoverer, has to say about God and biblical creation.
Darwin, if he were alive today, would probably be very happy with this poster. I want you to support science and reason. So get God's name off the money that we all worship and get in science we trust. I don't think we'll do that, but we do need to get that name off of our money. There is no question. And we have to understand that this is an exciting opportunity to be alive and not sit around and worry about some omnipotent being keeping score to decide whether we're going to end up in eternal ecstasy or unending damnation. So the problem is that people's prayers don't get answered. Why? Well, here it was in the New Yorker. God finds all the prayers of mankind in his spam folder. So we now have an explanation. Is to reawaken, as the advert will say, a reverence. I'll use that word. I'll take that word. For the natural world and our place in the natural world. To respect the creativity of the true creator, Mother Nature. And of course, I thought I'd show you the great breakthroughs in science from Marie Curie to the great accelerators and how much has been accomplished in religion. Well, if you go to the Creation Museum, there she is. She's a four-legged walking quadrupedal knuckle walker because of Dr. Ham. I don't know what he got his doctorate in, but it may have been one of those things you get at Sears. But there ain't no way that Lucy was walking on her knuckles, on four legs. So a child goes in and sees this and is impressed by it.
Kind of makes you think, doesn't it? The truth is, God created land animals on the sixth day of creation, right before he created man to rule over them. We were created in the image of God, and not in the image of apes, out of the dust of the earth, and given the dominion charge to rule over all of God's creation. That's why we put apes in the zoo, and not the other way around. Humans are vastly different than apes in so many ways, many of which were made plain in this video. Our brains, however, stand out as the biggest distinction, being nearly 3 times larger than they should be based on our lineup with similarly sized apes. Our brains are also wired completely differently than apes in so many ways. Humans were wired by God with the intellect to rule the earth, just as we were commanded. We sing, worship, have ceremonies, pray, educate ourselves, and do so many other things that reflect the fact that we are spiritual beings and not animals.
New gene reveals evolution of human skin color. Research of skin color fits the picture. For example, demutation gene called linked pale skin to the European population in the past 6,000 years. I ain't even gotta go deep, nigga. Look, pale skin swept through European population 6,000 years ago. Before that, dark skin. Okay. So anyway, so you see, this was written 6,000 years ago. So it's no questions. These people didn't exist when this was written. Okay. This uniquely important archaic inscription figured at a force through its explanatory Sumerian script, an additional key, the prehistoric cup mark script of early Britain, etc. Also attests the use of the cup mark script by the Moors or Amorites, who therein are called, looky there, Negroes, Aryans. Remember the Hitler thing? The Hitler thing, the Aryan nation.
Following the genealogies in Genesis leads us back to the spontaneous creation of Adam on the sixth day of creation, just about 6,000 years ago. Then, about 4,400 years ago, the world was destroyed by a flood. 100 years later, humans were scattered around the world from the Tower of Babel. That's why we have so many different people groups today. We were just one race of people, but with minor variations based on the genes each group took from Babel.
The Africans who came out from Africa have no evidence of any Neanderthal genes in them. No evidence of admixture. So they're the real pure humans.
And adaptations that have occurred since. Just like the Bible says in Acts, and he has made all nations of men of one blood to dwell on all face of the earth, ordaining 4 appointed seasons and boundaries of their dwelling. It's important to understand the significance of these two contrasting worldviews. Public schools teach students that they evolved from apes, and when they act like it, we hold them accountable like spiritual beings with a conscience and morality. Such a contradiction. The biblical account makes much more sense, that we are a special creation of God, created in His image to rule over the earth and to know and love God and our fellow man. Kind of makes you think, doesn't it?
Even where there was a lack of writing in conditions of savagery imposed by catastrophe, the same memory of a golden age was passed from mouth to ear. You may want to ask at this point, can we really place much credence in ancient legends? Surprisingly, a great deal too often, I'm afraid, we have been prone to dismiss folklore and mythology out of hand. But is this not unscientific, especially since traditions have often led us to discover physical remains? Now look at this. This is real quick. Look at this. This is the book, Rise and Fall of Atlantis, J.S. Jordan. I always show you the book so you can get this for yourself. Modern, which is Western, scientists and philosophers are curiously divided concerning the universe and the constant laws and order found throughout it whenever one looks. They refuse on principle to entertain the idea of superhuman, divine, creative, organizing intelligence. Yet they are forced to. See that? They don't even want to think it's a God who designed and created this goddamn society we in. I mean, this world we in, existence we in. They just like it's Big Bang and accidents and all this. I didn't even want to go here, but I'm gonna make a quick reference and explain that our star was in fact Moor, sisters and ladies. Heaven's star was called Moor. Moor meaning death, the metaphorical sense, falling from the higher state to the lower. Da 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 da. I wouldn't, I ain't even finna go. I'm gonna bring that home later. But just, I want y'all to understand this science. Listen, decreasing size of the earth and its organisms. Okay. There are all sorts of question marks over the current theory, not least relating to the suggestion that either the sun or the primordial earth were actually balls of superheated gases in the first place, rather than spherical masses of hyperactive electrical plasma as outlined in the last chapter. Notwithstanding this, it seems fairly certain that the earth, in its formative period, was gigantically larger than it is now. The so-called cooling process naturally resulted in a considerable shrinkage. Modern science already acknowledges the fact that some elements of plant and animal kingdom in ancient times, tens of millions of years ago, were hugely larger than they are today. Examples of these involve millipedes, some 6 feet 6 inches, and insects 2 feet in length, as well as dinosaurs 200 feet in length, plus trees and even tree ferns well over 300 feet in height. Go Google, no trees on flat earth. So, the fact natural shrinkage of virtually the whole Gaia organism, Gaia's Earth, over the last several hundred million years is conclusively not in question. What has not been acknowledged, however, is the Earth itself must have correspondingly have been gigantically bigger in those days. In addition, however, we face the thorny issue of humankind's existence at the same time, despite this complete contrary to the modern anthropological theory, suggesting mistaken assumptions of which have become apparent in the following chapters. So you see, shit was bigger back in the day. So let's look at this real quick. On a notable evolutionary effect upon the forward momentum of the race is that of cataclysm as Blavatsky, remarks, after the great flood of the third race, men decreased considerably in stature, and the duration of their lives was diminished, having fallen in godliness, and they mix with animal races, I just peeped that. Neanderthals.
The Africans who came out from Africa have no evidence of any Neanderthal genes in them.
Hot damn. Mixed with animal races, intermarried among giants and pygmies. Looky there. The later comment is a reference to the dwarf remnants of the polar second race, the homogeneous mass of monsters created by nature at that time. Bearing in mind that the secret doctrine has gigantic Lemurian proto-humans as some 60 to 70 feet tall. Physical deterioration. Also, on the third day of our deliberations, the Jigsaw team turned its attention to this question. First, set the pace. I'll grant that culturally and morally we tend to regress, he said, but let's look at the physical side. Surely in this sense we're improving, right? Sorry, Charlie, it was Watson, whatever the hell that says, speaking. Here again, according to demonstrated science, the opposite appears to be true. For what it's worth, the skull capacity with its inferred brain size of the Cro-Magnon man was at least equal to or sometimes superior to our own. Neanderthal, Stone Age, man had a appreciably larger cranium, 1,000 cubic centimeters, than that of modern man. The cranial capacity of the ancient man in Morocco, wonder why he went there, called Mussolinians by anthropologists, measured an average of 2,000 cubic centimeters compared to modern man's cranial size of about 1,400 cubic centimeters. Morocco. I suggest to you that the downward spiral of intellectual capacity began after the deluge. Mankind today is no more intelligent than he was 1,000 years ago, but we have accumulated more technology. We have the accumulated knowledge of past upon which we can draw and make improvements. I had to agree with that dude. Most people would be shocked if they knew that a general regression is likewise evident in a good many species, both in vegetable and animal kingdom. All right, so things have gotten smaller. So there's good stuff in there as well. Yeah, you don't want to read that, but let's get to the meat and gravy. Now, the laws of thermodynamics. We adjourn. If in the first two laws muse that cat aloud as he pressed the elevator button, I beg your pardon, Jacob, asked Perch. You must have heard them. They're the two most basic and certain of all laws of modern physical science. Perch looked blank. Well, the first is the law of energy conservation. You see, although energy can be converted from one form to another, the total amount remains unchanged. That is, energy is being neither created nor destroyed at present. The second law is the law of decay. It affirms that although the total amount remains unchanged, there is always a tendency for it to become less available for useful work. Just then the elevator door opened, we filed in. Something flicked on in my cortex just then, and I began to see what he was getting at. I recalled a statement by Harvard physicist P.W. Bragman. He had stressed the importance and the universality of these laws. The two laws of thermodynamics are accepted by physicists as perhaps the most secure generalizations from experience that we have, he said. Excuse me, he had said the physicist does not hesitate to apply the two laws to any concrete physical situation in confidence that nature will not let him down. Significantly, these laws of thermodynamics apply not only in physics and chemistry, but also in biology and geology. They had always proved valid wherever tested. Again, the elevator door slid open. Look, asked Perch, what would you care to explain the significance of this? Very well. Back in the room, let's eat first. Better still, sport the ride, cable back fine. An hour later, hard stop in Hong Kong, blah, blah, blah. Perch asked about the second law. Well, said Jacob, it's quite simple. The second law of thermodynamics affirms that there is a universal tendency towards deterioration, a transition from a more orderly state to a less orderly state, to de-energization. left to themselves, things tend to fall apart and reach a state of chaos. Consequently, where chromosomes and gene mutations occur, they are almost always detrimental rather than beneficial. All right? European people, mutations of African people, gene mutations occur, they are almost always detrimental. I rather like the way that dude puts it. As far as we know, all changes are in the direction of increasing entropy. Look that up real quick. Entropy, check it out. A measure of degree of disorder in a substance or a system. Entropy always increases and the available energy diminishes in a closed system as the universe. Of increasing disorder, of increasing randomness, of running down. Person snapped his fingers. I see. It predicts our research. Beginning at the top culturally, intellectually, and physically, the race has degenerated. But is this not in conflict with the overall theory of evolution?
There's only a few unbreakable laws in the universe, and one says that disorder always increases. We see this play out everywhere. Unfortunately, some people think this law is a problem for evolution.
Some people have said that life is basically applied chemistry, and chemistry is essentially applied physics. So then in that case, is biology applied physics? Although, you might say that physics is applied math, so I don't know how far we want to go here.
Well, without biology, there wouldn't be physicists, but you have a point. Like anything else, life obeys the universe's laws. A physicist might say you and a bacterium are both ordered bunches of particles. You're just a fancier and more complex arrangement. But surely, saying you evolved from something like that breaks the second law. How could evolution add order and complexity to life? There's something you haven't been told about the second law. It only applies to closed systems. And
now, one thing I really want your generation to embrace is that the Earth is a closed system. We cannot leave the Earth. There's no place to go.
Earth is not a closed system. If you took a pan of cookie dough, half frozen, half room temperature, and put it in a cold oven, eventually, thanks to entropy, you'd get a bunch of equally uncooked cookies, even though the total amount of energy has remained the same. But if we turn on the oven, if we add energy to the system, our disordered dough can transform into something deliciously ordered. The sun is like our oven. It's constantly showering Earth with more energy than we can use. That energy changes DNA. Plants use it to make more plants. Animals make more animals. And we turned it into cookies, all without breaking the law. Stay curious.
Why is Earth considered a closed system? Earth is a closed system in science. A closed system can be compared to a jar with its lid screwed tightly shut. Earth is considered a closed system, though the planet contains many open systems, such as human beings. Answer and explanation. Distinguishing between an open and a closed system involves the exchange of matter and energy. Earth is considered a closed system because only energy, not matter, is exchanged. A closed system like Earth can be easily represented by a sealed jar. When the lid is sealed, matter like air or water can neither enter nor exit the jar. If you placed that same jar in a 100-degree oven, the air inside the jar would eventually increase in temperature to 100 degrees, representing an exchange of energy known as heat. Just like the sealed jar, Earth does not receive new matter, other than the occasional meteorite not destroyed by the atmosphere. Likewise, the atmosphere prevents matter from leaving the Earth. With the exception of man-made satellites like Voyager 1 and 2, energy is exchanged, however, as Earth receives energy from the sun and loses heat energy to space.
Yes, it is. Goddamn. Look, let's not kid ourselves. Let's not kid ourselves. Broadly speaking, evolution implies increasing organization, complexity in the universe, and is in effect a doctrine of continuous creation. The first law of thermodynamics affirms, however, that creation is no longer occurring. Excuse me, reading for a long time. While the second law, that the original creation is decreasing in organization and complexity. I was almost rendered immobile when I realized what Jacob was saying. Evolution is an absolute denial of the second law of thermodynamics. Denise shuffled. You mean, Jacob, that evolution requires a universal principle of upward change, whereas the second law is a universal principle of downward change? Yes, put simply, Denise. Evolution and the second law cannot both be true. As for the second law of thermodynamics, it has been confirmed by numerous and various scientific tests. While evolution is and always has been a theoretical model not even capable of scientific tests. Get it? Look at this real quick. So, afternoon, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Biblical statements as to the destiny of man throughout history appear to have been more relevance than they have been given credit for. For example, the Genesis assertion that God finished creating and rested from all his creation is a simple statement that the process of creation is no longer an operation. No longer operates, a fact which is thoroughly verified by the two universal laws of thermodynamics. So the Bible is right. Science is made up shit. And when the Bible claims that since man's severance of communication with the infinite, this earth has become subjected to the bondage of decay for the present age, it is telling you that the creative process has been replaced by a deteriorative process implicated in the second law, thermodynamics. So the science, the Bible, science book. If you turn your head, you can see second law of thermodynamics, history recording evolution. Exact opposites. Which one you gonna believe?
Really, this is going to sound silly, but this is really, really important. Cutting edge genetics. One of the areas I'm really lucky I'm blessed to work in three distinct areas of biology: immunology, genetics, and reproduction. And on the genetic side, I get to go to conferences and hear about advances in genetics in all species. And I was just at one a couple of weeks ago down at the Cold Spring Harbor Lab in Long Island, and I learned a bit about what's being known about the genome of Neanderthals, the genetic makeup of Neanderthals. The genome sequencers, led by Svante Pabo, who works in Germany, has taken tiny little fragments of Neanderthal bones, isolated DNA, and determined the genome of the Neanderthal, and used that information to determine, using genetic methods, how long ago Neanderthals and humans were a single species, where the common ancestor was. They've also been able to compare human genomes and ask the question of whether there's any evidence of Neanderthal genes in the human genome. And they found that there is. And the amount is quite significant, upwards of 5 to 7%. Neanderthals used to live in the Neander Valley. It's, you could have called it the Cayuga Lake Basin, but that's where they lived. And out of Africa came the modern humans, and the word the geneticist uses admixed. They admixed with the Neanderthals. And they all used to live in caves in those days like this. Came out of Africa, admixed with the Neanderthals. This was Neanderthal territory. There was another group of Neanderthal-like creatures called the Denisovans. They lived up here in Siberia, and they have their genome has been sequenced. They were distinct from the Neanderthals. And so you can find in people of European and Asian ancestry evidence of about 7%, 5 to 10% of your genome is common with that of Neanderthals.
So he's doing fine. Look at her. Last girl my mom sent me up with had a mustache and a vestigial tail.
Oh, I'll wedge it right
Tail.
What is that on her back? What is that on her back?
Listen, okay, you can talk about me. I don't have a good TV. I don't have a lot. I'm a poor guy. So my TV, look at her back, man. What? It has a shadow. It has a shadow. It has a shadow. It has a shadow.
We've been separated from them for 30,000 years or so. And in some of the tribes in Papua New Guinea and those islands out there, there's evidence for a different kind of genome, which is probably the Denisovan genome. And they might have 7% Neanderthal and 5% Denisovan. So they might be 12 or 15% different from us. And in fact, the Africans who came out from Africa have no evidence of any Neanderthal genes in them. No evidence of admixture. So they're the real pure humans. Homo sapiens. Really, really interesting, and it gives you a lot to think about. Right.
Overwhelming, am I not? Are you too startled? Am I too removed from your ken?
Who are we, people?
Who are you? I'm more than machine or man.
More man.
More than a fusion of the two. Don't